Gathered Reflection on Good, Evil, and Social Order, April 2026. The good is infinite and invisible. Man only notices it because he has the idea of what is not good. Man looks at the good with one eye, but in order to understand what he is seeing, he also looks through the other eye toward evil. The strange thing is that evil does not truly exist in the same way that good exists. Evil is not its own thing. It is the movement away from what is right. It is the absence, distortion, or rejection of the good. Like darkness is the absence of light. Like cold is the absence of heat. Like a hole is not really the empty space itself, but the wall around it that gives shape to the empty space. Like a cave is not defined by the emptiness inside it, but by the stone walls that produce that emptiness. So when man says good, he is usually only seeing it through contrast. He sees suffering, greed, selfishness, dishonesty, violence, addiction, corruption, and because he sees those things, he points toward the opposite and calls it good. But the real good is not just the opposite of evil. The real good was already there before man ever named it. The contrast does not create it. The contrast only allows man to notice it. That is why the choice is not really between doing something good or doing something evil. The choice is whether or not to do what is right. If you do not actively choose what is right, then what is wrong fills the empty space automatically. When somebody steals, lies, betrays, hurts, or destroys, they are not expressing some separate force called evil. They are moving away from what should have been done. They are failing to do what is right. That is why society feels backwards. By the time somebody stands in front of a judge in a courtroom wearing handcuffs, most of what made them who they are already happened years before. It starts in the home. It starts with the mother and the father. It starts with the examples a child sees when they are still soft like clay. A child is shaped by what is rewarded, what is ignored, what is encouraged, what is normalized, and what is shown by example. If a child sees honesty, sacrifice, discipline, restraint, patience, and virtue, that becomes part of them. If a child sees lying, selfishness, dishonesty, addiction, recklessness, and cruelty, that also becomes part of them. People are soft in the beginning and then they harden. By the time society steps in with courts, prisons, fines, paperwork, judges, lawyers, and punishments, most of the real shaping is already over. That is why the whole system feels backwards. It reacts to the damage after it is already done instead of preventing the damage at the beginning. People disappear too easily into the crowd. Each person becomes invisible. Like tomatoes piled together in a store, people pass by each other, and nobody really sees anyone until they become a problem. But every tomato has to be picked up individually. Every tomato has to be touched, checked, and given a sticker. Human beings are the same. People need to be seen individually before they become lost. Because when people are left alone too long, they drift. They become bored. They chase pleasure. They become addicted. They get pulled into bad habits, bad people, bad thinking, and then eventually they stop caring. And once somebody practices not caring long enough, lying becomes normal. Stealing becomes normal. Manipulation becomes normal. Destruction becomes normal. The downward spiral becomes their natural way of living. That is why the future cannot just be more money, more comfort, more distractions, more endless freedom without wisdom. People are too free before they understand themselves. Too comfortable. Too distracted. Too disconnected. Just because somebody is legally an adult does not mean they know what they are doing. Many adults are still children inside. They have jobs, children, bills, responsibilities, but they are still impulsive, emotional, selfish, angry, distracted, greedy, and unstable. If society forgets that, then it expects people to be fair, honorable, sacrificing, truthful, and consistent when they were never taught how to become those things. So the future has to become something else. Not a world where people are controlled for the sake of power. Not a world where people are treated like prisoners. But a world where people are no longer invisible. A world where people are understood earlier, guided earlier, seen earlier, helped earlier. Because the pressure inside every human being is real. Every human being wrestles with selfishness, temptation, pleasure, anger, greed, laziness, distraction, fear, and desire. The struggle is always there. The scales are always there. The body moves through pleasure and pain. The conscience speaks. The mind sees. The heart struggles. And what man truly seeks is not just survival anymore. It is understanding. It is peace. It is unity. It is the end of unnecessary suffering. It is a world where people no longer destroy themselves because they were left alone, ignored, or lost. The court system is necessary in one sense, but at the same time it often feels theatrical. People put on robes, sit on stages, use old symbols and rituals, and act as though they are above everyone else. There is a feeling that the outcome is already decided before the person even has a chance to speak. That is what makes the system feel so frustrating. A person stands in front of a judge believing they finally have one chance to explain themselves, but often it feels like the judge has already made up their mind. The person is interrupted, cut off, corrected before they even finish speaking. That is why the system feels less like understanding and more like performance. But the deeper issue is not really the judge. The deeper issue is that by the time somebody reaches a courtroom, most of what made them who they are already happened years before. It starts in the home. It starts with the father and the mother. It starts with what a child sees, hears, experiences, and learns during the stages when they are still soft. A child is like clay. At first, they are soft and easy to shape. Later, they harden. If a child grows up seeing honesty, discipline, sacrifice, truth, restraint, patience, and virtue, then those things become natural. If a child grows up seeing dishonesty, selfishness, recklessness, addiction, greed, and chaos, then those things become natural too. That is why it feels backwards when society waits until people are already damaged and then tries to fix them through prisons, courts, fines, paperwork, lawyers, and punishments. The shaping happened long before that. What is happening now is that people are too free before they understand themselves. Too comfortable. Too distracted. Too able to chase whatever pleasure they want as long as they have the money. The body seeks pleasure constantly through the senses. Things can feel good, taste good, smell good, sound good, look good. The mind seeks stimulation, novelty, distraction, comfort, entertainment, and escape. That is why people drift. That is why they lose discipline. That is why they become led astray. This is why old systems of ethics keep appearing over and over again throughout history. The Noble Eightfold Path, the commandments, the deadly sins, virtues, conscience. All of them are trying to point toward the same thing. The problem is not just what people do. The problem is that people do not know themselves. Many adults are still children inside. They have jobs, responsibilities, bills, and even children of their own, but inwardly they are still impulsive, emotional, selfish, distracted, greedy, unstable, and uncertain. This is a world of children raising children. If we forget that, then we expect people to be fair, truthful, honorable, sacrificing, and consistent when they were never shown how to become those things. That is why what is needed is not just punishment. It is a new mentality, a new ethos. something that spreads through all people instead of only existing within a few individuals or small groups. People disappear too easily into the crowd. They become invisible. Like tomatoes piled together in a store, nobody notices them until one is picked up individually. Every tomato has to be touched, checked, and given a sticker. It only becomes visible once it is handled directly. Human beings are the same. Too many people are left alone, ignored, unnoticed, and forgotten. They drift through life without direction. They become bored. They chase pleasure. They fall into bad habits, bad influences, bad thinking, addiction, selfishness, crime, corruption, and despair. The downward spiral begins because nobody saw them early enough. And once somebody practices not caring long enough, they get good at it. Lying becomes normal. Stealing becomes normal. Manipulation becomes normal. Destruction becomes normal. It becomes natural simply because it has been practiced so long. That is why people cannot just be left to wander endlessly without guidance. Most people do not know what they truly want. They do not know themselves. They react to pleasure, pain, boredom, fear, comfort, loneliness, and distraction. That is why the future will likely move toward a world where every person is seen, evaluated, guided, and understood more carefully. Not because people are prisoners. Not because they're being punished. But because people are too important to be invisible. There may come a time when every person is psychologically understood in a much deeper way. Their struggles, habits, dangers, strengths, weaknesses, and potential may all be known. The same way technology already knows what people search for, click on, buy, say, and think about, society may eventually move towards something where every person is constantly being guided to make sure they do not become lost. That future may feel invasive, but it may also feel normal. Because if a person is living well, doing what is right, staying healthy, learning, growing, and contributing, then they may barely notice it at all. The deeper point is not really about surveillance. The deeper point is that people need to be seen before they are broken. They need to be understood before they become dangerous. They need to be guided before they become lost. The world cannot keep pretending that people become adults and suddenly know what they are doing. Most people are still trying to understand themselves. That is why the future must become something more unified. Something where people are no longer invisible. Something where people are no longer left alone to destroy themselves. Consciousness is shifting. Humanity is moving towards something different than what it was before. The number of people is increasing, knowledge is increasing, technology is increasing, and with that comes a different state of mind. People are beginning to think differently about themselves, about society, about reality, about the body, about the mind, about spirituality, and about what human beings are ultimately trying to become. The exact form this future takes is still unknown. It may not look the way people imagine now. It may not be microchips or machines in the way people talk about them today. It may become something entirely different. But it feels inevitable that humanity is moving toward a future where people are more understood, more measured, more guided, and more connected than they are now. Because every human being carries pressure within themselves. There is always a struggle. There is the conscience. There is temptation. There is desire. There is the question of whether or not a person will do what is right. Some people restrain themselves because they fear consequences. Some people restrain themselves because they are trying to do what is right. Some people restrain themselves only temporarily before they eventually break. The pressure is always there. That is because every person carries selfishness, anger, greed, pleasure, pride, distraction, and destructive impulses within themselves. Some people learn to control those impulses. Some people learn to express them in a different way. Some people are consumed by them. But the struggle exists within everyone. That is why it feels dangerous to simply leave people alone and assume they will always choose what is right. People need structure. People need guidance. People need something higher than themselves. The problem with human judgment is that human beings are inconsistent. A judge can be biased. A police officer can be emotional. A politician can be corrupt. A parent can be unstable. Human beings are affected by their mood, their hunger, their anger, their fear, their pride, their selfishness, and their personal history. That is why the current system often feels unreliable. Too much depends on the emotions and opinions of imperfect people. The future may move towards something more neutral. Something that understands people more deeply and responds with greater consistency. Not because humanity wants to become cold or mechanical, but because humanity is tired of chaos, tired of corruption, tired of selfishness, tired of people being left alone to destroy themselves. The ideal future is not really about control. It is about unity. It is about everybody understanding that they are part of the same whole, that every position in life matters, that every person has a place, that children are fed, educated, guided, protected, and raised properly, that people are not divided, that people are not invisible, that people are not abandoned. Humanity once focused almost entirely on survival. People hunted, fished, built homes, raised children, and worked together simply to stay alive. But now survival is no longer the only goal. Now humanity is asking deeper questions. Questions about reality. Questions about consciousness. Questions about the body. Questions about spirituality. Questions about divinity. Questions about what human beings are ultimately trying to become. The future may be a world where the struggle to survive is no longer the central issue. A world where the struggle between people is reduced. A world where people no longer live only for money, comfort, status, and distraction. A world where the friction between people is calmed. Where the heartburn within humanity is calmed. Because the real struggle inside every person is already difficult enough. Every person wrestles with themselves, with anger, with greed, with pleasure, with laziness, with temptation, with selfishness, with a sense that there is always something more they should have done. That is why every human being is under pressure. The pressure exists because there is always something to contend with. The scales of good and evil are always present within the heart. The mind sees them. The body feels them. Pleasure and pain reveal them. And every person lives within that struggle every day. The choice is not really between doing something good and doing something evil. The choice is whether or not to do what is right. If somebody sees the opportunity to steal, the real choice is not do I steal or do I not steal. The real choice is whether or not they will do what is right. Because what is wrong is not really its own separate thing. It is the movement away from what should have been done. The good is all there is. The good is infinite. The good is invisible. But man only notices the good because he has the idea of what is not good. Man looks at the good with one eye, but in order to understand what he is seeing, he also looks through the other eye toward evil. The strange thing is that evil does not truly exist in the same way that good exists. Evil is not its own thing. It is the absence, distortion, rejection, or corruption of the good. That is why it does not make sense to say that a person is both good and evil in equal measure. If there is poison in the water, then the water is no longer pure. Even one drop changes the whole thing. The water may still appear clear, but it is no longer untouched. That is what corruption is. That is what selfishness is. That is what dishonesty is. Once it enters, it changes the whole thing. But even then, the corruption itself is not something independent. It is only the twisting of what should have been pure. The good is still the deeper reality underneath it. Man sees the good through both good and evil. Without the idea of evil, he would not even know how to speak about the good. The good could still exist, but man would have no contrast through which to notice it. That is why man experiences the good by means of contrast, even though the good itself is deeper than the contrast. Man only sees the good because he sees the contrast. Without the idea of evil, man would not even know how to say the word good, because there would be nothing to compare it to. That is why the good is not the same thing as man's idea of good. Man's idea of good depends on contrast. But the true good exists before contrast. It exists before man names it. It exists before man compares it to anything. It is like a hole. A hole is not really defined by the empty space itself. It is defined by the walls around it. The empty space becomes visible because something around it gives it shape. The same is true of a cave. A cave is not called a cave because of the empty space inside it. It is called a cave because of the stone around it that gives shape to that emptiness. That is what contrast does. It does not create the good. It only allows man to notice it. Amen. Let it be so.